Hi guys, it's Luetin here, and welcome back for another Battlefield Roundtable. I'm joined today by Levelcap, Matimio, and first time here, Jackfrags. So welcome to you. We're going to be talking about Endgame mainly today, but as always, we can bring up any topics that we want to talk about generally. But I think it's a good point now to sort of look back through Endgame, sort of think about it. It's been out a little while, the dust has settled, and we can kind of think things through about it. Level, I'm just going to pass to you first. I mean, do you think it was a kind of... Was it what you expected? Was it good enough for you for like a final DLC?
Um, Good enough. I mean, is
Yeah,
it the best
yeah, I
DLC?
know. Did it live up to your high expectations?
My high expect Nothing lives up to my expectations, but uh I was a little sour with it at first, and I'm kind of warming up to it here and there as I'm learning how some of the game modes play out or some of the maps play out. I
Hmm.
think like half of it works really, really well, and the other half is just like complete failure in terms
Yeah.
of like capture the flag on some maps or rush on some
Rush.
maps just completely fail.
Hmm.
But then you'll play CTF on another map and you'll have these awesome intense rounds. And it just seems to be like game mode and map, like sometimes they just won't match up, and that'll be a fail round right there. But so half is good, half is bad.
Do you think that's kind of like a natural thing to happen? Like at any point, do you think it's kind of tricky to design a map that's going to work,
I think it's
well on all game
because
modes?
it's
I think.
the first implementation of CTF,
Yeah, yeah,
and they weren't really sure how it was going to work. And what I'm finding now is like, hey, having an attack helicopter in a really small map of capture the flag is a bad idea. Because if
mm,
you got a good chopper team up in the air, the other team can forget about anything. Like you're not getting that flag.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's super imbalanced in some situations.
Matimio, were you happy with it? Do you think it worked out well?
More or less, yeah. I like that they tried the maps themselves. For I'm going to speak more for Conquest because that's normally what I play. Uh, I like how everything's a lot more open, and while the maps are like the same size as Caspian, my first impressions of it, and still now, is it feels more battlefieldy, where it's not just you're always around objectives the entire time. You actually need to run to things, and I
Mm,
like that a lot. And I think that's probably my favorite thing about it, but also the one thing that kind of gets on my nerves sometimes because I got used to the really fast-paced gameplay, and it's not that as much anymore. But
yeah.
yeah, overall, it's I'm pretty impressed.
I was genuinely kind of surprised about the capture the flag because I was so uncertain about that. For me as a long time like World of Warcraft player and knowing what a nightmare it can be in other games as well, I was so unsure about how it was going to work out. But I was genuinely surprised. The only thing that lets it down is the players and their lack of kind of ability to understand about where they need to be in relation to where flags are being traded around. But I mean, Jack, I know with your kind of competitive interest, capture the flag is kind of one of those game modes that can end up being really sort of competitive from team to team basis. How do you think like capture flag sort of playing out? Do you think it's working quite well or what?
Well, I think CTF works best infantry only. I think there's far too many vehicles on the CTF maps in BF3,
Mm,
and I think that actually spoils it for me. If they condensed it and just had the infantry there, maybe just a couple of bikes, because I think the bikes are really cool and very handy for getting around on if you go and steal a flag, whatever. But things like attack helicopters, tanks, Z11s, just doesn't work in my opinion for CTF. And when you can just stick a big fat tank on your home base, plus you've got all the majority of players that I've seen on CTF anyway are so defensive. Like you've got 80% of your team in your base, plus like a tank, plus an attack helicopter. I've just seen so many games that just end up in a stalemate. And all the time I'm thinking, if these vehicles weren't there, maybe we could actually have an interesting game on our hands here. Although I have had some fun with capture the flag in Endgame, absolutely no doubt about it. Especially when I was grinding for the S-tac, or you have to get all the caps or whatever and the retrievals. I don't know. It's not something that I'm searching for on the server browsers because
mm.
it just always seems to me anyway, unless you're playing with like a large group of players, to just turn into 1-1. So each team gets one flag, and then you just wait 20 minutes because no one can get a cap.
Yeah, they're worried. I think people are just not really aware of kind of the ways that they can react to one another when you get into those kind of situations. And I've had exactly the same thing. But we've also had some really, I don't know, I have had some amazing rounds and some appalling rounds. But the ones that we've had that have been good have been really interesting. And I think overall, I would say that it did kind of balance out quite well. And it was no worse than maybe any other sort of game mode that I've played when you're playing sort of publicly in general. But I mean,
Do you think it might suffer because there's only one spawn point?
yeah, possibly. I mean, but there's other mechanics that make up for things. Like I really appreciate the sort of the recap feature, the way you don't just dive on the flag and it's secure. You actually have to try and work as a team to secure it back. It gives more people a chance to kind of move those things backwards and forwards. But I think like people have said that the vehicles do kind of screw it a little bit. I do think as well. But the trouble is like you can't not have any vehicles on a battlefield map because they're just too big. It would be ridiculous. It would take forever to transport it back again. It only works like that quite well on smaller maps. But I think keeping it on the ground for a start would be a good thing. There's nothing more frustrating than having a heli come in, two guys jump out, grab the flag, and then they're away. And you're like, oh, it's back at their base, and you've sort of lost it completely. But even the tanks are bad for that. I mean, we were in a game the other day where the enemy had heavily defended one of their bases. We managed to break it out, turn it around, and I think I came in on a bike and I grabbed the flag and I went to run out the base because my biker had been killed and I was trying to get out to get somewhere else. And my friend in a tank just pulled up. I just hopped in the tank and I was like, oh, great, now we're nearly invincible. And we just sort of slowly drove off back to the base and we took a bit of fire, but they weren't going to take us down after we got on the move, So I don't know, it can play out like that as well. But what about air superiority? Sorry, no, go on, Level.
Well, I think the trailers kind of got me interested in CTF because it showed Jeeps and motorcycles. And I was like, that'd be cool. Like all these Jeeps and motorcycle chases going down the road and trying to get the flag back. And that's not really the case at all. It's sort of like, oh, there's a guy in a motorcycle with the flag. Let's just javelin him, taken care of.
You can have all these epic Jeep fights.
You're not going to get the Jeep anywhere near the flag. I mean, like, I've rarely seen the Jeep actually be able to infiltrate the enemy base. It's almost always dead from javelins. I think that was kind of an oversight, especially with, like, say, Nabondown Flats is like, hey, what if everybody spawns with a javelin? Oh, look, like, vehicles aren't going to last more than 3 seconds on this map. I don't know how they didn't, like, foresee that, but it's just kind of weird.
There's a lot of things like that. But, I mean, for me as well, Capture the Flag was always such a tactical game mode, more so than so many others. I mean, Conquest, obviously, you're moving around bases and you're moving back and forth and moving around the enemy. But you can kind of, like, public players can kind of fill in the gaps, as it were. They're kind of around and then other people can make tactical plays. But with something like Capture the Flag, it's so critical when you move forward, how many people you keep back in defense, how do you play it, how do you push through, how do you cap, how do you carry, do you try and take it back and clear your flag on the way, do you go ultra defensive, just send out a couple of people, do you go super aggressive? But regardless of any of the ways that you choose to do it, it needs a team effort. It just doesn't work if you only have a few people doing it. And this is what I found from playing it on my server, is that my squad will be pushing really hard, we'll have a game plan in mind, but unless you have those other people to support you, and the other, if the enemy are playing super defensive, it's almost impossible to get out. And I think it suffers for that more so than other game modes like Conquest and Rush and things like that. That's for me the big deal. But air superiority, any thoughts on that one?
Well, Matimio loves to fly jets.
I don't fly jets, so I can't really comment. Actually, I can. I did it once, and I was able to get a couple of kills, which never happens. So.
Which suggests that the game mode is totally broken.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
How have you found it? Actually, so Matimio, did you even have like jets leveled up? Did you even have any equipment for them, or were you starting?
When I first started playing, I jumped in the jets and I got like 2 service stars with it. But the controls, I did it in a really wonky way that I shouldn't have ever done. And so then, like a year ago, I stopped just playing in the jets altogether. So I did have everything unlocked. But yeah, I'm not very good at it.
But I mean, I've found as well that although you will have people in this game mode that play very, very well, and I've seen people getting, crazy kills to deaths and capping the bases and all the rest of it, but there may be people who don't get a lot of kills, but they can still have a role to play because they can still cap those flags and generally be in the airspace and things. I mean, if you found that it's too dominating,
it's a really boring role, though, isn't it?
It is a boring role, yeah.
Try and loop the loops around blimps.
I've still seen people top score. It made me laugh at the end of a certain round that I played the other day, and there's a guy on the other team, top score, he's got 10, 15,000 score or something like that, but he's 0 and 20, and it just made me laugh to see that. It's just
impressive.
Not many rounds do you see someone with such a crippled KD, but such a high score. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, he was playing the objective harder than anybody else. So, yeah, seriously. Oh, dear.
I don't want to say it feels like it's tacked on because, obviously DICE, they do put thought into stuff and they won't just throw it on there. It's not a bad game mode air superiority, but I just don't think it's that fun. It's fun for the first time you play it. You're like, whoa, there's 24 jets in the sky, Maverick, Top Gun, and you have a few dogfights and you crash into each other, but then that happens again and again. And then it just doesn't become fun to me. It just turns into a grind fest. Like the whole fun element of jets is, you start the round, you take off. The first thing you got to think about is taking out the enemy jet. Like if you're successful and it's not a stupid fast vehicle respawn server, then you get like a minute or so to do some other jet things that are enjoyable. Like you could bombard a tank or something, help out your team on the ground. You could take out the attack helicopter, and then the jet respawns and then comes after you again. Then you have another dogfight, and it's that that difference, that variation that makes jets fun.
Strategy.
Strategy. Just dogfighting, going around in circles and crashing into each other. It's just not that fun, in my opinion. But
yeah.
There you go.
I find sometimes that occurs almost too much. People forget there's even an objective to play. They're so obsessed with the fact that there's 20 other jets in the air or whatever that they're just like, oh my god, must dogfight, because it's more action than they've ever had in a jet before. They usually get into a server and just circle round and round one other player for 20 minutes. But in this game mode, there's actually a lot of fighting to be done, and I think people are kind of still addicted to that at the moment. But as I say, yeah, I mean, you're right, it can be totally boring on the sort of flip side of that as well. But I mean, I think they could have made it more interesting. I mean, every single map for air superiority is just airspace. There's nothing else. And
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Clouds, maybe.
Yeah, but the geography, I mean, think about, what about 1943? When you think about 1943 and you had to control that central area on air superiority there, and, when people are shooting you, you could go down, you could go right down, you could run through valleys and then bank round. There were even little sort of sea arches that you could fly through and stuff like this. Mm-hmm. So it was really amazing. It was much more fun sort of environment to play in, and it gave you the ability to kind of pounce on people, because you could kind of come up behind a mountain, you knew they were in front, and then as you came over the top, they're right there, and you can catch them by surprise. And also the ability in air superiority on 1943 as well, you could fly very, very high into the sky and actually dive bomb people from the sun, so that if you knew the position of the sun in there, you could come down from above, they would never see you coming, and you could just literally cut them to pieces. And also you had enough height and space that you could do a full vertical run coming down. You're coming completely vertical, come down, you could destroy them, and then still have enough space to sort of bank back up and recover. You just can't do that on air superiority in Battlefield 3 because the ceiling height is so low. They've deliberately done it, I think, to keep the action low and on the ground, and I guess from their point of view, interesting. But I mean, Matimio, what would you have preferred to see in terms of kind of geography to make it more interesting? Would you want to?
Exactly. We were on the same page completely. I never played that game, 1943, because that was Xbox exclusive, right?
No, it was on the PS3. I don't know if it was on Xbox as well.
Okay, it was on console. I never played it, but I saw videos of it, and it was there's a lot of geography that allowed you to kind of outmaneuver someone or to block line of sight, and it wasn't just this open field, like you said. And maybe that would fix things. I think it's also just the game mechanics of jets. I don't find jets to be all that appealing. And they're just very simple in a sense that you just kind of go around in circles the entire time. But I think that, if there was something to mix it up, the game mode in general would be a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, have you ever guys seen those the sort of mountainous things in Thailand? You know, they're kind of like rock pinnacles that come out of the water. Do you know the things that I mean? It was on that James Bond film, Man with the Golden Gun, for anybody who wants to look it up. And what I imagined was more kind of like, imagine if you had like 10 helicopters per team or whatever, something like that, 10 attack helis per team, and then you're fighting around that kind of environment, sort of water low, but lots of kind of rock outcrops that you can fly in and around and up and down and stuff. You could have some really interesting gameplay having 10 helis sort of pouring down and going up and around.
The Grand Canyon. You can pull off an Independence Day. Right
Independence Day, yeah.
Welcome to Earth.
Yeah, just exactly that kind of thing.
I think the telltale sign of why air superiority sort of fails is I've seen some incredible jet pilots join into a game, and at the end of the run, their KDR isn't particularly impressive. And it's just because it's such a mess up there where it's like you're on somebody's tail, but 3 other guys just lock you and you run out of flares, and that's it. You're dead. There's no cover. There's no way to break the lock, get out of the way. You're just dead. So it kind of just turns into a, hey, let's just fly around and shoot at stuff until the round's over.
And that feels good. It's good to see these guys get punished after after the suffering that we've been dealing with for like the last 10 months.
Let's not reward skill.
No, hand it back to them, spank them for like, you know, being such air circling bastards for the last year. No, give it back to them. So no, it's true. I've seen some pilots that I know are good, really excellent pilots that can sort of dominate on normal rush or conquest modes, and they go into this and it's average. You know, they might have a better round or a worse round, but they don't stand out, and I think that's the really key thing. But I don't necessarily see that's a bad thing. I mean, it kind of, I mean, yeah, it must be frustrating for them. They're trying to do really good and they're constantly
locked in. How do you
not
see that as a bad thing?
Because it means that it kind of
reward you for using skill or strategy.
Well, hang on. I thought
the more you play it, you're not going to get better at it.
No, but I thought, hang on. I think we discussed before about jet pilots and how they're too good and it can kind of sway the battle too much. But I think like in that game mode, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's frustrating as hell. But within the specific confines of air superiority, I think it's better to have a situation like that where it sort of does balance out, and therefore the gameplay, whilst perhaps being a little bit repetitive, like Jack said, where you kind of just end up mashing people up like time and time again. But overall, you don't have these people kind of dominate everyone down. And to be honest, that can be a bit miserable from, you know, in gameplay. But I mean, people are going to say, oh, well, that's just the down, you know, get better if you want to beat these people, which is fair enough. But unfortunately, a lot of people just can't be bothered to spend the time flying the jets that long. It's simple as that, really.
I think that with their superiority, though, like, I don't think DICE intend it to be like a new Rush or a new Conquest. I think they've just gone, you know what, it's the last expansion pack. Let's throw this on. You guys just go and have fun for a bit. I think that's the message that I got from it anyway. It's just like, you know, YOLO. Stick air superiority on there. See what happens. We're busy with Battlefield 4.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest as well, I was kind of surprised they put it on. People had talked about it, but I didn't necessarily expect it to be in there. And when they
probably wasn't very hard for them to implement. No. Just slap some jets on a map
and a couple of balloons. Get them.
Yeah.
I would have. You know how people have been complaining about air radar and how it doesn't really work. I mean, it doesn't fuss me because I've never used it massively anyway. But a lot of people have been going, oh, air radar, it doesn't work, it's so small. Now, Dasgray pointed out that these balloon sort of buoy things, I think in real life they actually have kind of radar functions. And I remember me and Dasgray were talking about this before it came out, and we were talking about the fact of before we knew what the game mode was going to be like, and we were talking about what would happen if when you capped one of these things, it kind of became like an air radar for your team. And, you know, that could have been an interesting aspect whereby everyone that you capped provided air radar for that area. So you could see kind of for the players on that team. So if you controlled all of them, it gave you an air radar sort of, you know, on your screen. Maybe it wouldn't show you, for example, the whole thing, but it would just make air radar active for you in a kind of more interesting way. I don't know. I mean, is there any way that you guys think it could have been made more interesting? Because Jack, you're saying it's like a little bit boring time and time again. I mean, we've talked about geography, but anything else? Like,
I mean, I'd literally just say that, just the map design, because like everyone is together. If you had like a map design which had different sections and, you know, caverns and valleys that you could fly through, it would separate those 24 players. At the moment, everyone's just in a big square in the middle. That's why it's such a mess. But if you had, you know, different sections of the map where you didn't always have visibility on everyone, just that change alone I'd want to
Yeah.
play it then. I'd be like, yeah, I'll try that out. I can zoom in that valley, and that means I can go and cap that flag while the rest of my team do this other thing. Just that simple change would have made a massive difference.
Okay, another question now, sort of looking back generally through the DLC. So we've had like the last one now. My question to you guys, do you think having the variety through the DLCs in Battlefield worked? Do you think that was something that really worked for you, having this kind of quite differentness? We've talked about the reasons why DICE may have done that, but just as a kind of gameplay feature for people enjoying the game, do you think it really worked? I mean, Matimio, do you think that worked for you? Did you like having the differentiation between the two, between all of them, or would you have preferred slightly more consistentness? The maps were kind of had more reliable elements between each one rather than being so different between each set.
I mean, it was cool in the sense that we get to try things out that we've never really experienced, like close quarters. That's completely new, and the large maps. But I would have rather it just been more consistent. So, mediums, maybe 2 medium-sized maps, a large map, and then a close quarter map. Like, I would have liked that a lot more. I think more people would have been happier with that. It's just, I think it was just a big experiment on their part, and I guess we'll kind of have to wait and see what they do for Battlefield 4 and their DLCs. But I would have liked things to be more consistent.
Level?
Yeah, I agree along those lines there. And I think like they need to market it is the thing. You have to think of it from a business perspective. And it's like, how are we going to market this next expansion? We can't just say like 4 maps that are different, and here's some new guns. They got to come up with like armor superiority or something like that, all these taglines and stuff. But just giving us an expansion that's nothing but one type of gameplay, I think is a little bit worrisome, because especially if you weren't into, say, armor gameplay, you weren't going to really enjoy Armored Kill at all. And so they took a big risk there. On top of that, dividing the expansions the way they did, it makes it hard. I see a lot of the servers going back to the default maps again. There's not a lot of maps from these expansions that are super populated servers. There's still like a billion maps playing No Shark Canals Team Deathmatch, where there's like still many, many really good TDM maps from a lot of the other expansions out there. And it's just kind of unfortunate, because I feel like the fact that those expansions focused so much in one area and became ultimately unpopular, then those maps just kind of failed regardless of the game mode. So I kind of wish they took sort of Matimio's approach, and I think they could have still thrown in some like gigantic armor maps to like one of them and sort of said, hey, look, this map here is going to be great for big armor, and they could have still marketed that pretty well. I
think so. I think they could have retained the elements of each DLC, but just had a little bit more consistency throughout, so that it didn't play out so dramatically differently between each set. I mean, Jack, what do you think? How was your experience overall from then till now?
Artistically, I think the variation is brilliant. I think each expansion pack definitely has its own style and feel. They if you put them all down and look at them separately, they're all obviously very different. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Matt. Like maybe 2 medium maps, 1 large map, 1 small map, something like that. Like across the board, I think that would have worked quite well. And like Level says, I think they could have easily marketed that. And maybe instead of throwing on these, I'm going to call them a gimmick. I'm going to call tank superiority and air superiority a gimmick. Maybe instead of having those, concentrate on maybe adding more maps or actually improving those 4 new maps just as they stand. But yeah, the variation is cool because it gives you something fresh and new. But yeah, I agree with Matt that the maps maybe could have followed a bit of a guideline, perhaps.
If you had to pick like one out of the DLC that worked the best, I'm going to say not Karkand, because any of the others apart from Karkand, which would you say was your favourite, and why do you think?
Easily Karkand? Aftermath.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just
are
interested
we not
to see.
included in Karkand, by the way?
No, I'm not. I'm not including Karkand because everybody says Karkand. Although maybe you guys wouldn't say Karkand. I'm just interested to hear what you guys think was the standout one and why, because a lot of people have said about Aftermath being the best, and I'm just kind of curious as to, from your guys' point of view, what you think is interesting about the gameplay mechanics, dynamics of whichever one that you thought worked best. So, Jack, for you.
Definitely 100% Aftermath. I think in Aftermath in particular, the level design was the best that it's ever been. Some of those maps were on par with some of the vanilla maps, which they'd obviously spent a lot of time on. I like the fact that there were no jets. They just had there weren't any attack helicopters either, so it was heavily focused on infantry, an occasional tank. The new Humvees were pretty cool as well. And I don't know, but just the level design of those maps, like I'm not really a big fan of Conquest. Like I much prefer Rush on BF3. Like in BF2 and BF 1942, I was all about Conquest. But obviously, like Rush wasn't in BF2, was it? It was introduced in Bad Company, I think. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times I actually prefer Rush in BF3. But when those Conquest maps came out in Aftermath and I was playing with the squad, like I remember we did like a squad up together, I was just blown away. I was like, wow, these maps really work well. You had like this big outer. I mean, most of the maps were pretty similar in their basic design. You had like an outer ring where vehicles could sort of go around, and then in the middle, lots of rat runs and cities and buildings you could duck into. And primarily as an infantry player, that is awesome to me because it just throws up so much variation. Hopping between flags, jumping in a Humvee, shooting out a Z11 pilot. I just love the map design in that expansion pack. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Matimio, what about for you?
Aftermath, for pretty much everything that Jack just said. I mean, it's a fantastic DLC. Map design, it's infantry focused. I personally think that the infantry combat in this game is the best aspect of it. I mean, vehicles are fun and I enjoy them every once in a while, but I just kind of get bored with them unless I'm in an attack helicopter.
Level?
I'm gonna say Close Quarters had the best weapons edition. Like they just brought so many good guns to the game in Close Quarters that were actually usable. And then the Aftermath maps, I really think they just outdid it with those. The map design, the visual quality of those maps. Sure, I like Back to Karkand, and I really enjoyed playing some of those BF2 maps, but it was also clear at points that some of those maps were perhaps the layout was a little bit dated for some of the new vehicle types and stuff like that in BF3. So the translation didn't work perfectly, but I still do like a lot of the map design in Back to Karkand because those were the best maps from BF2. But yeah, like Jack was saying, maps that were heavy infantry focused with a little bit of armor and not too much to worry about with air. I don't mind like a little bird here and there, but little birds can't dominate the map. I think part of what gets people to hate certain expansions is when a attack helicopter or a jet can just dominate around and you have that feeling of helplessness on the ground. Whereas if a little bird comes flying overhead, you can, duck behind something, hide somewhere, shoot an RPG at it if it makes a close pass. You have a lot of tools as just the casual player or the solo player to actually deal with that. And in a much larger game with a jet, like if you want to play infantry, well, there's not a lot you can do against a top-notch jet pilot.
I mean, as well, something that I've been thinking about, and I've spoken to a couple of people this week, was the whole kind of premium thing and how all of these DLCs running up to now, they've had the premium thing running on this one. Now, there's been discussions and a lot of people are talking about free-to-play and microtransactions and all this kind of stuff, and it would be pure speculation. But I mean, people may remember that, I think with Bad Company 2, you didn't even have to pay any extra. I think it was literally a case of just pre-ordering. If you just pre-ordered the game, I'm pretty sure that you got the follow-up DLCs and stuff like that for free.
Yep.
You guys,
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a massive deal. That's so unbelievable. People maybe who didn't play that game or went into Battlefield at that time would be perhaps surprised to hear that it was literally, you didn't have to pay any extra. It was literally a case of go to the store, say, yes, please, I want to get this game early. And, when you go to pick it up, that's it. You've got the special edition and you can get all DLCs from thereafter. Was it including Vietnam as well?
No, I think you had to buy that separately.
Yeah, I think that one was, wasn't it? It was extra. But I mean, there are many, many reasons we've talked about before about why this would be a good thing to do. But I mean, Jack, someone who we haven't had your opinion on this would be interested to hear. I mean, we've talked before about the fact that it would be perhaps a great idea to have the actual map DLCs free for people to have so they can gain access to those maps, and it kind of keeps the player base high for those maps so you get a good turnover of gameplay, and it also keeps the game fresh for people who've been playing it a long time. But perhaps when people buy the DLCs, okay, the DLC for the map comes out, but then there's extra stuff specific, whatever that may be. I don't want to go specific on it, but whatever content they were going to release along with it, it could be all sorts of different things. That would be the element that people actually pay for. Do you think that'd be a good thing for the game?
I think, like you said about the maps, I think that would be good because it would keep the turnover, the number of players high. But if you do stuff like that, you're going to get people saying that the game is pay to win. Like, even if it's just like camouflage, if there's something that someone can buy that a non-paying DLC customer can't get, everyone's going to scream that it's pay to win or something's overpowered.
The only thing I would say to that, though, is that you see the interesting thing about people saying that is you can actually do that now. If you buy DLCs now, you can take those guns and equipment back into vanilla mode. So that already exists, you see.
It does, yeah, but they don't really give you a significant advantage, do they? I guess like the DLC guns aren't really overpowered in any way.
Exactly, but then we're not saying that they would be with the other thing. And this is the point. This is an interesting point in general, actually, about this. I mean, Level and me talked a lot about this the other week, but I mean, this whole thing about buying guns and so on for guns, there's nothing that necessarily says these guns have to be insanely overpowered, or that by picking one gun you're going to be able to run around one-shotting everyone. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's extra equipment, it's extra options, and I think that's what people need to keep in mind. I mean, if you're coming at it from more that point of view, do you think that would be then a good thing to do?
Yeah, I guess in a way. I mean, they have the things like the shortcut stuff at the moment, don't they, for BF3? So you can put, I think in the UK it's like $24.99 for the ultimate shortcut bundle, and if you buy that, you can get all of the unlocks, you can get all of the vanilla weapons, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, me personally, I don't see anything wrong with that, because say someone wants to like experience more of the game, but they work a lot, they don't have much time to play it.
Yes.
But they can just go, there's 25 quid, I can get all my unlocks.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not really giving you much of an advantage. So I'm totally cool with that sort of thing, definitely.
I think the other thing is when they release those packs. I mean, and again, they did this for Bad Company 2, for anybody that didn't realise or remember that they did this. So the previous game, which was years ago now, they did it then as well. So this is no new thing. They allowed people to have these kits then as well. But it's great for people that maybe, don't have the time to level up. Again, people would counter that and say, well, if they don't have the time, they don't deserve it. Well, maybe that's a fair point to make. But I think the other thing to say is that you got to remember that people are coming into the game at all different periods. I mean, Battlefield is a game that runs for an extended period of time now. So there's going to be people buying into that game constantly new. And whilst, 6 months into the game, people are going to probably be expected to still kind of level up and unlock equipment. But further on from that, if you're a year into the game, there may be people who have unlocked absolutely everything. And, personally, I always find that myself going into a game, I could pick up the very first gun and I wouldn't see a massive significant difference. Yeah, sure, you're going to have some perks and unlocks that are going to make a bit of a difference in gameplay, but you should still be able to hold your own. But put that aside, I think for some people it would be nice, and they don't have the sort of patience simply to kind of go through that whole process, and time could be a factor in that. I personally don't have a big problem with it. I mean, they're paying to kind of get a boost to bring them up to the level of everyone else, and I think just so long as they don't release it at within the first 2 weeks, it's not a really big deal. I mean, Level, are you a fan of that? Do you think it's a good thing as well to bring in for the game? Is it fair?
I'll be honest, I dozed off there for the last few minutes.
Wake up, man.
I didn't catch the
kit unlocks, are they good or bad?
Kit unlocks. All right.
The ones that you can purchase.
Right.
I need to know. Was it my boring
You know what?
tone?
Remember you talking about kit unlocks? I think it's because you started talking about kit unlocks for about 3 minutes is when I started listening.
Go on then. Tell me now.
Yeah, I think kit unlocks are a good idea. In fact, I would be surprised if, I mean, it's a little off topic, but I'd be very surprised if there isn't some sort of in-game store for the next Battlefield where you can start unlocking new stuff that's only pay to unlock. I think all games are going to go that direction, so people should definitely prepare themselves for that. But Yeah, for somebody who doesn't have the kind of time to play a lot, you should get those kit unlocks. People can cry pay to win all they want. If the game's fun, people are going to play it. That's all there is to
Hmm.
it. It's like I think the whiners kind of have a loud voice, but ultimately the effect of what they have on the community, I think people are going to play the game regardless.
Matimio, what about you?
I agree. As long as they do it correctly and they don't, like you said, they don't have it a couple of weeks after the game launches. Oh, hey, you can unlock everything. People are going to cry foul. And as long as the microtransactions, which are going to, like Levelcap said, they're going to occur, as long as those weapons or whatever they give are not like blatantly overpowered. Like if they're truly just like way out of balance, then people are going to be upset. But yeah, I think this is where things are going to be heading, and I really don't have a problem with it. As for the maps themselves, I think that's a phenomenal idea as well, and I think that's also what they should do. Like you said, keeps the player base going, keeps everyone involved, and I think it also would be a great PR thing. Like, hey, come back to Battlefield. We have all these new maps you can play.
Yeah.
It's not going to cost you a thing, and it's not going to just, this is what they could distinguish themselves from the other big AAA titles and still make money off the DLCs from like weapons or customizations on the side. So, yeah.
I mean, because that's the thing as well, is that people are always saying about with DLCs. I mean, this is another interesting point when it comes to it, is that, people are always complaining about DLCs and saying how, okay, they've just, thrown a load of new maps out. They haven't really done anything. I mean, that is an interesting thing to look at there. The fact that, okay, yeah, the Battlefield DLCs were kind of a bit extreme in how different they were from one another, but at least they made the effort to make them that different. They really tried to throw, I mean, Close Quarters, unbelievably different in gameplay compared to the other things that we'd had to that point for Battlefield. Then you go into Armored Kill, again, hugely different. Aftermath brings it back a little bit, and then Endgame, we've got a kind of whole mixed bag of variety there. But they've gone all over the place with it. They haven't just kind of gone, okay, here's another map, it's kind of like Karkan, here's another map, it's kind of like, I don't know, Nosehair Canals or Damavand or whatever, it's got mountains, blah, blah, blah. So they've really changed it up, and it wasn't even a case of just scale with some of the maps. They really made them feel and look significantly different. So I think for me, that was one thing that I really felt like they'd actually made a strong effort with each DLC. Regardless of whether you enjoyed it or not, you could see that they'd actually made a significant effort and not just put it in place there. I mean, Jack, was there anything that you felt had not been included in, not necessarily the game, but DLCs? Was there any kind of mode or map design or vehicle element that you feel was kind of untouched that you had actually thought of previously and thought, hey, this needed to be in the game, or did it kind of meet your expectations?
Well, I think they've got to be careful, and they've got to tread very carefully with DLC, because they've got to think about the next Battlefield game at the same time. So if they start throwing in all these new ideas and all these new vehicles, what's Battlefield 4 going to be? You know what I mean? They can't just add a load of new stuff, because then they've got nothing to say for the next actual title, so Battlefield 4. So I think with that in mind, I think they did a very good job. I'd have liked to have seen like a search and destroy mode. I'm a Counter-Strike player and I love that game mode, 1 life per round, that sort of thing. But it didn't come. But I'm not fussed. I think the map design of, like I said, in particular Aftermath was very good. I mean, I wasn't disappointed really with any of the DLCs. I mean, Close Quarters was obviously visually very nice, and like Level said, the guns were really cool, but the map design sucked a bit. There were too many angles of exposure. Armored Kill was a throwback to the past. These are massive maps, but I think they were a bit too big. And I know that they're going to hate me for saying that, but I really think that even on PC, 64 players, I think those maps are too big. And then Endgame's like, yeah, here you go, guys. Throwing a couple of new ideas, throwing some bikes. But I think they've done a good job, considering that they have to bring out Battlefield 4. They kept it fresh. So yeah, good job, guys.
Okay, and I think that's a good kind of overall way to look at sort of the DLCs that we had to this point. I mean, I think Endgame overall, it kind of summarized everything would be the best way to sort of think of things from my point of view. They kind of made it a little bit more. It had more individual elements between each part of it, rather than sort of being a general theme. It had a lot of things going on in it. It had the bikes, it had the maps. I mean, some of them felt a little bit closer, like Operation Riverside plays out very different than Abandon, just because of the whole map layout design. Whereas with some of the other DLCs, although they look very different and they are very individual, I think they did have more kind of elements that were consistent throughout. I think Endgame was a kind of more mixed bag, like I've said, but I think we should just finish up by mentioning this week about sort of the teasers and stuff. Like I said, I didn't want to talk about Battlefield 4 tons in this video because we don't have tons of information. But Level, got to ask you, what's your sort of impression of these couple of little things this week? Have you been pleased by them?
Well, the teasers, man, the speculation behind what they mean. Like Matimio and I had a 5-hour-long conversation about the little.
We recorded it too. It's gonna be live.
No.
Could it be a submarine? Is it is it a boat? Like, what is it?
Do you think that they're kind of they're discussion generators rather than actual accurate things, or do you think they're just is DICE just trolling us again?
I think it's just like, hey, just so you know, Battlefield 4. It's coming up.
Yeah,
like I don't think it's supposed to get people like, oh my god, they're gonna have this in the game. But obviously they're gonna have a tank in the game. Okay, there's a propeller. Maybe there'll be boats. I kind of hope there aren't boats, honestly.
I mean, there already are boats in Battlefield 3 right now.
Yeah, but that was like a large ship.
Yeah, that's true.
That was like a aircraft carrier propeller
or
or
a submarine or something.
Well, some people have been saying that they thought it was like anti-submarine torpedoes, the kind that you can drop from like Black Hawks and stuff like that.
It looked like it was a ship, though.
It looked like a kind of ship propeller, yeah. But
I'm just gonna say this: like 1942 submarine combat, extremely boring. Like,
tell us, please, go on.
There's not much to tell. Like, you can't actually look underwater in your sub, so you just sort of see your little antennas sticking out of the water.
That's what I want for Battlefield 4.
So you're just
that's what I want.
And yeah, you can shoot at boats, and you watch your torpedoes go in the water, and they're hard to aim, and it's just no fun. It's ridiculous. But
it sounds like the kind of thing that I'll definitely have in Battlefield 4.
They should just do a sub-only mode. Just scrap the first person
superiority.
It is. It's just that reversed. We're not in the sky, we're in the water. Just turn it literally straight upside down, and you're right there. Okay, guys, so we've been talking about Endgame today, and we'd like to hear your thoughts about it, how you have found it as a general experience. How does it fit within the framework of the other DLCs that we've had to this point? Do you feel satisfied with the Battlefield 3 DLCs? Have they lived up to your expectations? Do you feel they've covered enough for you? I think they have personally. They've gone through a lot of different things. But please drop it in the comments below. We'll have a read as always. Been joined today again by Jackfrags, Levelcap, Matimio, and thanks for watching or listening. I'll see you next time for some more Battlefield 3 Roundtable.